everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. Well, in case you haven't joined us, you haven't subscribed, you don't know who we are Painless Universal. We are a show where we talk about inspirational stories of people who have gone through pain or have overcoming difficulties or have inspirational story. And we talk about how they have overcome these inspirational story and found their joy. Today's guest is no exception. His name is James Asquith. James is someone that is really, really fascinating. I mean, he is a young man who at the tender age of 24 got the official Guinness World Record for setter and holder for being the youngest male to visit all 196 sovereign countries, 196, by the tender age of 24. Now he's on a mission to help others do the same. To believe in yourself and know you could do this on a budget. He's a former investment banker who started on his humble journey from humble beginnings, not having a dream, not having an inspiration, it just happened. Let's meet James to understand why he took on such a mission of trying to visit visiting all the countries in the world, southern countries in the world, and what was his likes and dislikes and the challenges he found along the way, and how he overcame those pain to find his joy and also to find his own purpose and mission. Meet James. Well, thank you so much and welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. I'm really excited to have you. I've done your introduction and your introduction was really phenomenal because I could not believe that you've been to 196 sovereign countries. I love the way they say it because, we never know what countries are what these days.
Exactly, right?
It is so confusing because when you said 196, when I Googled it, different answers comes along. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, you got like 193, 196. Some people even say 220 something.
Exactly. I'm like, where did I get that number from? But one thing I must ask before we even get started, does South Sudan include in your visits? Have you been?
Yes, it does. I have indeed. So I'd already been to Sudan actually, and then they broke off South Sudan, so I had to go back.
Oh wow! And did you have fun? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I like South Sudan. I much preferred it to Sudan. So yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, wow. So, James, I'm so glad you joined me. I know you're so busy. Where are you right now with your busy schedule? You're traveling the whole time and can never get hold of you. Where are you right
now? So I'm in Johannesburg at the moment. I literally only just booked a flight out of here today because I had no idea how long I'd be here. So I'm trying to get my pilot's license down here in 2 weeks, which is pretty difficult and impossible to do. But we thought we'd try and do it. And then from here, I go to Qatar next week, then Dubai, couple of days, and then I'm off to New York, Los Angeles the week after. So yeah.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe this. I honestly, I'm so excited to talk to you because there's just so much I have to ask you about this traveling, how you even get yourself organized to travel. But anyway, with guys, it's much easier, I presume. But before we go into all of that, how did you get on this journey? What started it? Can you just tell us a little bit about who you are?
What started it? Honestly, I don't really know. I get asked that a lot, and I just kind of went for it and did it. I never had the travel bug. I never wanted to really do traveling. I've been to a few places in Europe and only Florida with my family, and then went with my two best friends. We went to Southeast Asia, did the classic whole backpacking circuit. We went and volunteered building houses in Vietnam for a couple of months. And yeah, I just picked up the travel bug, came back from that trip. Learned a lot about myself, and it was a massive culture shock seeing Southeast Asia for the first time. And I came back and I booked my first solo trip. I went to Egypt and the Middle East, and kind of went from there. But I didn't set out to want to go to every country. I guess got carried away.
Well, okay, can you tell us a little bit about your beginnings? What was it like growing up for you? Were you such an acquisitive child, or what happened as a child? What was it like growing up? Because I know you grew up in England.
Yeah, my like growing up was fantastic. I had a great family around me. You know, hardworking, never kind of had loads, but had enough, and that was kind of great. I guess it's kept my morals and kind of how I think about things grounded today, I'd like to think. And yeah, look, you know, my dad was a pilot, and my mum flew as well. So I kind of I always had these big dreams and ambitions of doing stuff, and not only, you know, the seeing the world bit was on the backbone. I wanted to go and you know, I guess have more, because I went to a school where, you know, the kids had a lot, and my parents kind of spent everything to put me through the school. So you know, it was a case of, you know, I saw a lot around me and didn't have it, and knew I wanted more. So yeah, I just knew I wanted to work hard, and you know, started washing cars at 12 years old, and working any kind of job I could get. At 15, I had 3 jobs. I was blowing up balloons in a balloon shop, and you know, just saved every penny I could. And I thought, look, you know, I'm going to use this money to go and buy a house one day. Instead, I used it to go traveling because things changed. But yeah, I had big ambitions and big dreams, and I guess in some ways I still do. Well, I certainly do. I mean, that's a stupid thing to say. I definitely do more so. You know, I got asked the other day by someone saying, "What does success look like to you?" And you know, when do you think you'll have succeeded? And I said, well, never really, because I certainly don't measure it by money. You know, I've had money, I've lost money, I've been in between, and money's great because it's a means to be able to do the things you want to do and give you time, most importantly. But away from that, it's you know, I want to make a difference, genuinely make a positive difference, and inspire people, and do lots of things that, you know, the only problem and limitation of that is time, I guess. So I don't really ever see that as that success. You know, again, and I use the example, you look at David Attenborough, right? He's 96 years old.
Mm,
It's not like he could turn around and say,
mm,
oh, like, you know, I wouldn't do this TV show because, and again, I'm just making this up as I go along. This isn't something that I normally say. I'm like, let me use the David Attenborough example.
mm,
I'm literally just making this up as I go along. And I thought, look, you know, he wouldn't sit there and say, um, oh, like I've had these huge shows and these huge nature shows. If I get offered another gig to do a show, it's never going to be as successful as, I don't know, like Planet Earth, for example, which was super inspiring. I'm sure the guy wakes up every day and thinks, look, you know, I do inspire people and a young generation. And if I can make a TV show or something that inspires just X amount of people, or even one person, it's kind of a success to him. So, you know, I guess from his point of view, that
mm.
might be what success looks like. And I'd kind of think that would be in some ways how I think on a daily basis.
Honestly, that's phenomenal. But I was wondering, how did you try? How did they get into the Guinness bit, the Guinness World Record of not only saying you were a world record holder, but you were also a world record setter? How did that come about? What happened? Were you on country number 10 at this time, on and saying to yourself, okay, now I'm gonna keep going, and you did this
Yeah.
by 24. Just
Yeah.
could you give
I
us a
think I've been to probably over 100 countries I've been to. And I just suddenly thought, look, how many are there? And I was like, how many people have been to them? And when I did it, I think more people have been on the moon than to every country in the world. And I think the size of that club has now grown massively, because over the last couple of years, it's become more of a, you know, competitive kind of thing for people to go and visit every country. And you know, that's a different story entirely. If people so prerogative, do it your own way. But certainly it was nice that I didn't kind of have to say, oh, I need to do it in this time.
yes.
I think the youngest person before me was 37 years old or something. But there wasn't an official Guinness record for it. So that was the whole setting of it, and I did it in my own time. And yeah, it was only after a certain amount of time that I thought, well, look, you know, is this a record? Could I do it? And even when I finished, I didn't get the world record for maybe a year and a half after, because there was so much evidence of like witnesses and photos and everywhere. And I thought just a passport stamp would be an official kind of document and enough to suffice. But no, not for Guinness. They are super strict. So that took a long time to go through and do. And eventually it kind of came around, which was pretty cool.
How many passports do you have? Because I
8.
each yeah, because each time I travel, I know there are difficulties with traveling with certain countries like you might I don't know. Let's not even go and mention their names, but certain countries you can't travel with with this stamp on that passport or whatever. How did you manage that?
I just had to change my passport when that came, or just change the route that I took. And I certainly experienced that with countries falling out with other countries, and you weren't allowed to go there, and
Mm.
with certain stamps. But I don't think it's as bad as people think. A lot of people say, oh, you can't go to Israel if you've been somewhere, or vice versa, in the Middle East, and it's actually not that bad in terms of if you have a stamp on there. And if it is, then I just got a new passport. So yeah.
Gosh, is it because you were a guy that is easier? Honestly, I mean, I've done this traveling and I know my suitcase. I can't go without a big suitcase. I travel with 4 suitcases, even if it's for 4 days, because I panic. I don't have enough clothes. And on the other hand, I see guys and they're happy with the hand luggage and they could go for 3 months with this hand luggage. Please, was there a difference? Do you think it's easier for you guys than we women to do this?
I mean, look, I would have probably said yes a while ago, and certainly, look, there's some things in terms of safety that is yes. I can't deny that.
Mhm.
But look, the youngest person to visit every country in the world now is a girl called Lexi. So it's the youngest person is now a girl, and that was actually beaten twice. A girl, I think her name was Taylor, was the youngest girl, and then it was very quickly beaten by a girl called Lexi. They were kind of both doing it at the same time. So actually, the two youngest people, full stop, are both girls to do it. So I guess they managed, which was awesome. And congratulations for doing that. But so look, however they did it and whatever they did, that's awesome and a great testament.
You've been around, you've really traveled across many continents, many countries. You've seen it all, you've seen the different culture, you've seen the different ways of living. One of the things I get curious, and I always ask, and people say to me, "How do you adapt?" I said it's all about fitting in yourself into the country. How do you find adaptability, especially when you're a foreigner, you go to like for example, you go to my country, Nigeria, or you go to a place like South Sudan, you have to adapt to the culture, the food, the way of life. How do you adapt yourself to fit into a situation like that?
I mean, look, I touched earlier on culture shock, and it was certainly something at the start that was insane for me to see. I just guess you pick it up the more and more that you travel, and like a couple of months ago, I went to Ghana randomly, and I hadn't been back to West Africa for a couple of years actually. When I went to Ghana recently, and I got there, and I was like, wow, I'm back in West Africa. Um, and the culture shock for me kind of lasted an hour, and then I was pretty comfortable with it. So I guess that just kind of comes with time and what you're seeing. But again, South America is so different to um, the Middle East, and so different to Asia, and everywhere's got their own good and bad things. And again, people talk about coming to London, for example, from around the world, and how it's a shock to them. You go and try and ask a stranger for directions, and they'll just look at you and walk past, or whatever it might be. So I guess everywhere's got their pros, their cons, and their culture. It's not just a case of difficult culture, because in some ways it can be easier. I find certain parts of well, a lot of parts of Africa as one of the most friendly continents. And then you have the same in areas of Southeast Asia like Vietnam as well. I couldn't walk home every evening in Vietnam without being offered about 3, 4 dinners. You just walk past someone's house and they'd see you that you were clearly not Vietnamese, and they'd say, "Hey, come for food in my house." And so um, you just kind of get used to it, and the different nuances.
And what's your favorite country to visit? I mean, since you've been, which is your favorite?
As one country, it's the US, and that's an answer that people are a bit surprised by. I think that when people have done a lot of traveling, um, what's the best way to put this? They like to take the conversation onto themselves and say, "Oh, like Tajikistan or something," and then everyone's like, "Oh, that's exotic. Tell me about Tajikistan," when no one knows about it.
Yeah.
And so the US sounds like kind of a boring answer, but look, the reason, the rationale is, if I had to pick one country, I like diversity.
Mm.
And the US has it all. Alaska, Hawaii, the national parks are like nothing else in the world. Yellowstone, Yosemite, the Deep South, the culture of New Orleans and Nashville, Texas.
Utah. You're
And
right.
then, yeah, don't even get me started on
Mm.
California and New York and stuff. So you have the glaciers up in Alaska, you have the Polynesian culture in Hawaii. Do I prefer the culture in Brazil? Is there more culture in Brazil than in the US? Yeah, there is. But also, Brazil has beaches and rainforest, and that's it. That's the whole country. If you wanted to go and say, "Oh, like I want to go and see some glaciers," you don't have it. So yeah, I like the diversity of that. And if I had to pick a country, that'd be it. Look, if Europe was one country, Europe would be the best, but it's not. It's a continent. So
That's true. That's true. No, I agree. I can see why you say US as well, because I've been to US and I've been to several parts of the US, and there's also different. Like you go to New York, you're right, and it's so different from Utah, for example. It's just like this is just completely different, and it gives you that sense of learning, so less sense
yeah,
of learning something new. Even the way people act in New York will be so different from the way
100%.
people act, and you're like, okay, I'm learning something new every day.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can see why you would go towards that direction. What about your least favorite? Where, I mean, not necessarily least favorite, but a little bit challenging place to visit that you have to just be a bit cautious when you're there and just, to adapt to the place.
I mean,
There might
yeah,
be
my timing
several,
was
I'm
never great
sure.
with going. Yeah, my time was never great with going to certain places. So, Yemen is somewhere I thought I'd never go back to. I went back to Yemen for some humanitarian work recently.
Mm,
That's challenging. Somalia's never much fun. So, yeah,
yeah.
Somalia and Yemen, probably those two.
Yeah, because I've been to Somalia. It's really difficult when you're there, and just the environment and I think the people still need to understand. Yeah, it was difficult. I, you're doing this, and a lot of people will be wondering, how is he sustaining this? This is not easy to sustain. I know booking a flight, just people who are amateur, booking a flight, just going from saying you're going from London to New York to South America somewhere, and then when you're there, you're going to another African continent in country in Africa continent. Then you say you make your way back to England. I can imagine the round trip. For me, I'll probably make a mistake because I would just book it off through BA, and that would just be that would be my just. How would you do it, and how do you sustain it? Also, another question I have to add on to this is that I know what you're doing is really, you're really, I won't say the word influencer, but it is what people use. But how do you turn this business and this thing you really enjoy into a money making passion of yours?
Um, I mean, firstly, it's not really a money making passion. It's I pay myself and my company a pound a year salary, so it's never been about the money for me. I did that as a job before.
Mm,
After I got the record, I was still in London for a while, and I think I sat in London for 7 or 8 years working in investment banking. And I was doing a lot of traveling in between as much as I could, but I felt generally quite trapped. I didn't enjoy my job towards the end of it, so I worked in a job that gave me good money, and I was hopefully pretty smart about keeping that to be able to give myself flexibility now. But what I do now, it's never been about the money, and certainly kind of even if you look at the, as you say, the word influencer and social media, I don't do paid promotion stuff on there, so that's just more. This is how it is, honestly. But I obviously founded, the business and Holiday Swap, which is something that allows people to be able to go and travel more and travel cheaply. So if you say to me right now, I've got to go to the airport and get on a plane, I'm so excited. I'll be buzzing. I love it. And as soon as I get into routine, I find it lethal. It doesn't work for me. So, it's kind of weird how I do it now. I've mixed up my routine with the consistent travel. And it, actually, if you'd have seen me about a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was a lot more. My schedule was so stupid that I'd be going London, New York for a day for a meeting, back to London for a meeting, back to New York for a meeting, over to Japan for a meeting, over to LA for and it was just all over the place. Whereas now I kind of try and segment it down into 1 to 2 week things within a certain area. So, I don't like flights that are 7 6 7 hours. I find them pathetically short now. I'd much rather the flight was like 15 hours. So yeah, I like being on a plane. I work well on a plane. I'm in my zone. I've got very few distractions, and I just live in airports and absolutely I love it. And it's weird, I know it's weird. I just it is what it is for me. And look, it's a case of, it's a lot of hard work behind the scenes with Holiday Swap. And I don't know. The idea just randomly came to me after a while. I knew I wanted to do something in travel after I got the record, and I just didn't have the idea until I thought, well, look, let's actually create a sharing platform where people can save on accommodation, and people call us the travel Tinder. So you match your place with someone else's, and it's actually kind of been quite big for us last year during COVID, because we focused a lot more on regional and domestic rather than, hey, like, you want to go to Sydney from London, cool, but then you got an expensive airfare. It's more the case of, hey, like, you want to go up to Scotland from London, or, places that are certainly open, like New Zealand and Australia, where people can move around more freely, pushing people to be able to do that. And, we're gearing up for a pretty big year, to be honest. Later this year, I see a pretty strong renaissance towards late summer this year of people traveling. But I think that the style is going to change a lot. I think that people want to see and travel domestically again. If you say to someone in London right now, hey, like, you can go on a nice little trip for a weekend up to Scotland, they'd bite your hand off because of lockdown and because of, how rubbish the situation is. Whereas if you'd have said that to someone a year ago, they'd have kind of been like, oh, whatever, Scotland, it's always there. It's on my doorstep. I can do that anytime. Same as going on holiday to Spain from Europe or whatever. That seemed a bit boring because I guess, airfares and travel became cheaper in some ways that I guess we took it for granted. And, the idea of instead wanting to go to New Zealand or go to Bali or Japan was exotic and fun, the other side of the world. But I think that for a while now, people's travel habits will change. And even though I see stuff coming back later this year and a bit of a renaissance late summer, I don't see international travel recovering until 2025-26, and that's probably one of the longest estimates out there. But our habits have changed. I think that people will look at the staycation a lot more, and they'll look at what's local and what they can do and appreciate it. If the one thing I think that comes out of this and COVID situation is that we appreciate the stuff that was easy and normal, but haven't become easy and normal because of restrictions.
And now you mentioned COVID. I think one of the key things for me is I've been reluctant to travel. I've done some traveling, but not as much as nowhere close to what you've done at all. And I've done the COVID test. Every time you have to leave, you have to do COVID test. How would you think you could help airline industry to boost confidence for people like that are back home, to tell them that it's okay to travel again? What are the things you're doing to help? Because it's only people like you that could really encourage someone to say, look, guys, I'm out here. It's fine and it's safe. It's not that bad. What are you doing to help that?
I'm just doing my thing, really. That's it. My advice would be, don't go and watch these clickbait influencers that are out there that take one little, I don't know if I can swear on this, but that take one crappy little trip and then they make some clickbait video about, oh, what it's really like to travel in COVID with face shields and stuff. And look, I'm certainly not saying I'm denying COVID. It's awful. But there's no difference really going to a supermarket as there is being in a HEPA air filtered airplane, for example. And again, I'm not necessarily saying to people go travel, because there are lots of restrictions and it is difficult and it is still affecting a lot of people. But maybe plan it, think about it, and have something to look forward to at the least. And I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medical expert, and
But
neither are these influencers that you.
They say experience speaks
But
better than words. You've done it. I mean, I always believe it.
well, yeah,
I believe in people who've done it. You've lived it. You've done it. So your experience is more. I don't know how to say it, but you have lived it. You have seen it, and that speaks volume to so many, because you've seen the airplane. You've seen what it's like, and you've seen
yeah.
the
I mean,
airport.
look, I was in Lombardy and Milan when that was the epicenter. Actually, when China was as well at the end of last year. I was there too. I picked my timing pretty badly. I've been in the UK at the worst times. I've been in New York when it was the worst time, and California when that was really, really bad. And it still is bad in California. And then here I am now in South Africa, which is basically blocked from going to almost every country now. So because they're super strained. But I guess doing some things right. I try not to be stupid, and it's, just try and be sensible with it. And I know a lot of people have been sensible and still managed to pick this thing up. But I guess you have as much chance going in a supermarket or just not wearing a mask or whatever it might be. So I've had no problems, and I've taken 110 international flights so since COVID.
Wow. Yeah, no, I think it's true. I like what you just said. It's all about being cautious. You could get it in anywhere, any supermarket. Plan your trip way ahead, and find out what the guidelines is wherever you're going, and see if there are restriction, if you have to quarantine for how many days. How do you deal with quarantine then? Do you just manage it and do the COVID test the whole time?
Yeah, I've done 50 something PCR tests now, so I've taken all the precautions I've had to, but I've been hopefully smart, if that's the right way to call it, in terms of how I've moved around and traveled and hopefully avoided quarantine by not going to a place where I have to quarantine, and taking the appropriate PCR test before traveling, after traveling, before then seeing people as well. So, I've probably taken more precautions than I had to, especially when I was coming back to the UK. And because I'm a CEO as well and coming in for business, it was, there were large times where I was exempt as well, but that didn't mean I didn't, I tried to make my own rules, what I thought was sensible as well, that I still came back and got a PCR test when I arrived, even though I was technically exempt, which was nonsense to me because I'm a CEO. That shouldn't make me necessarily exempt over everyone else. So, beyond that, I'd take a test when I'd arrive, wait for that to come back, and then a couple of days later before seeing family, friends, or meetings or anything like that. So, I took extra precautions. I think last year, when you mentioned the clothes thing about traveling around, I dressed like rubbish, and all my friends say it. I wear the same thing all the time. So, I think last year I spent more money on COVID tests than clothes.
that's that's what you find, because the COVID test now is so expensive. I think a lot of people, businesses have monopolized on it. You're on a mission to help other young people around the world, to encourage them to visit the country, but also do it cheaply. What would be your message to other young people who are looking to follow your footsteps, but don't even know where to even begin, how to start with a budget? They don't have that. They come from low income background, but they want to see a few countries. Have never traveled even in their life. What would be your message to them?
Look, firstly, make your own story and carve it out, right? You don't want to follow anyone else's path. You want to take their advice, and everyone makes mistakes, right? So do your own thing. There's no substitute for hard work. There really isn't. Again, I wasn't given a silver spoon myself. I worked hard for and paid for my whole travels. I've never done anything that was sponsored for that. And I only got Instagram a couple of years after I got the record. So when I kind of hear people saying, "Oh, do you think that someone will sponsor my trip and airlines, hotels, whatever?" I instantly kind of think that they've got off to the wrong start. And again, if you want to do that and can do that, that's cool. That's your prerogative. But there's no substitute for working hard and paying for anything or doing it by yourself. And yeah, look, again, I had to work as I went around the world. I had to stop at certain points. And I remember there were days I was negotiating the price of a place to stay for $1, and I sat there for an hour negotiating $1 off the price of it because that's what I had. So when I worked whatever I could and did it, I guess in my own ways. So if you've got that kind of goal and you're going to work hard for it, hopefully you can get there and do it. And one of my buddies, actually, he's from Brazil, and he went to every country in the world as well. And there were videos of him 6 years ago. So it's like, I understand that I'm also with the British passport in some ways in a place of privilege. I get that. And he said he wasn't in a place of privilege coming from Brazil as well. And he would be working selling phone cases and covers. And there were videos of him for like a year, 2 years, going up and down the buses in Sao Paulo, selling these mobile phone cases. And his message was, look, if a poor guy from Brazil can go and work their damn ass off, go to every country in the world, then you can too. And that's a message that's far more appropriate coming from him, because he did it, to someone that was able to, even though when I was 15 I was earning £4.62 an hour, as I said, in a shop, and that was what the minimum wage was then. But I understand that's a much bigger minimum wage than a lot of other people are going to get around the world. So that is privilege, absolutely. So it's about doing it your own way and not necessarily comparing to someone else. But again, I think that there's just no substitute for setting a goal and working towards it.
My final question be that you've seen the world, you've seen there's so much compassion in the world, there's so many people who need our help. How do you think, from what you've seen around the world, that we could all reach out in our own little ways? Because, for example, I live in London. London is not, sometimes we complain sometimes in London because we think things are bad. And I always remember the only reason I got better was when my mentor told me, always think about the others who are less privileged than you are. You've seen the world. What would be your message to others who might be going through a mental struggle with the lockdown we are in right now? What would be your message of hope to those people from what you've seen from traveling around the world?
I mean, look, that's a serious and a big point that you raise. And I know a lot of people that never struggled before are really, really struggling with it genuinely. And, the key point is you never know what someone else is going through and dealing with. there's a lady here in Johannesburg, right? And every morning she serves me my coffee. She's so bubbly and nice. And then this morning, genuine true story, she was just like so quiet and silence. And someone meets her on the first day and thinks, oh, she's just like quiet, silent, maybe even thinks they're rude. You
Mm.
never know what other people are dealing with and going through. So there's just no substitute to be kind. And I try and live by those words. And look, even at times, I'm sure all of us can be having an off day and be rude or be short or be snappy or whatever. But if someone's kind to you, like it makes you a different person. And I've noticed that about myself so much more. So giving off that positive energy, and it can really genuinely change around someone's day. It absolutely can. And the way that and I'm lucky that I don't really get too many trolls and people that leave me crappy comments, but if I do, I'm like, send them my way because I can deal with it. And people kind of like how I handle that, but there's just no substitute for that. Like, why would you need to be nasty? There's no need to ever be nasty. Just be kind. It really, really is the biggest key.
Wow, James, thank you so much. And I hope
No, thank you.
the rest of your trip goes well. And when you're next in London, we hope to catch up soon. Thank you so much for your
I
time.
might still be in South Africa for the next 6 months at this rate because it's difficult getting out, but we will see.
I know. I wish you luck with that. Thank you so much for your time, James. Thank you.